we have a couple more audience questions that have rolled in. One is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? And did you always want to be a writer?
Well, I always say that all children are born creative. I mean, when you have little kids, you see this, that all of them write as soon as they can. All of them draw and paint. They dance and sing. Like, all children do that. And most people outgrow it. And so I think a better question is, why didn't I outgrow it? Why did I keep going? Why do other people stop? And some of that has to do with encouragement. I think my parents were professors, but they were very encouraging of creativity in general, I guess. And part of it is, but that with that said, we didn't have a lot of money. So I had student loans. I always knew I was going to have to figure out a way to, if I was going to want to write and earn money. So I got qualified to teach at the college level, and I also became an editor. So I edited for many years as well. I just built a life that was centered around the idea of trying to write, but making money in other places. And some years I made enough money writing, not to, and other years I didn't. So having a job was really important, having jobs. And a lot of people don't want that uncertainty, which I really get. It is a really uncertain life, and there are a lot of ups and downs to it. So why did I persevere? I think I just knew from an early age that I wanted to live in the world of books, and that maybe there were different forms that could take. And I wrote a novel, and it got published, and it encouraged me to keep going. So, and then I would just say one other thing about that, which is that perhaps just by my nature, but I always say to my own children that when I had a choice between listening to someone who was telling me I wouldn't succeed or I couldn't do something, and listening to someone who encouraged me, I followed that person. In other words, I followed the yes. And that's a nice thing, which is that if you can drown out the people who are telling you all the negative things, and just follow that slender thread of someone telling you that you're good enough, that you can do it, that you have it in you, and listen to that voice. And it might not be your own voice, even it might be someone else's. That can be all it takes. That can make all the difference. There are many times that I could have stopped writing. And I tell my students as well, and that it often comes down to chance, or to someone taking a chance on you, or someone just bolstering you. Because it's a hard life to be a creative person. And no matter what, if you do it for a long time, you'll have ups and downs. So you're taking on a volatile way of life. But my background, just quickly, is that I was born in England. My parents are Southern, from North Carolina and Georgia. And I grew up going back and forth. And then eventually we moved to Maine. So I have these disparate parts of my past and personality. And I think that peripatetic nature, that quality, is something that has led me to write about a lot of different places.
So we have a couple more audience questions if you're game.
Yes, my husband brought me a glass of wine. So.
Oh, there you go. That's a surprising number of authors drink during these Zoom events.
I mean,
which is great, because you can't really drink at a library. If
I know,
you're coming into the library, it's pretty much dry. So
I was feeling sorry for you. The most fun writer event that I went to before I started doing this was with Ruth Reichel, who's this incredible writer and chef, and Bill Buford, who has a new book out, who spent a year living in France and cooking and raising children there. And The two of them are old friends, and they were drinking red wine, and they were sitting in their kitchens, and their family were sort of wandering in and out, and they just looked like they were having the best time ever. And it was like we were eavesdropping on this really fun conversation between old friends. And I thought, that's what I want. That's what I want it to be like. If I'm going to do these events, I want it to be fun, and I want to have that relaxed sensibility, because I think, you know, it can be stiff. Zoom can be stiff, and you want it to feel to people like they've jumped into someone else's sort of interesting moment, or that they're overhearing a fun conversation. And so that was my goal when I set off to do these things.
So one audience question has to do with your novel Orphan Train, and the question is, let's see here. The question is, what was your inspiration for writing the novel Orphan Train? But I'm interested in what it felt like to you know, did you feel like you caught lightning in a bottle with that book, or did you? I mean, I don't know where you were exactly in your career before Orphan Train, but Orphan Train's a book that, wasn't it #1 on the New York Times bestsellers for 2 years or something, or off and on for 2 years, something like that, right?
Yeah,
And
it was on the list for a really long time, and I think it was in the top 5 for a year or something. But it was like, now it seems inconceivable to me. That, you're right, it was a crazy moment. I was a mid-list author. I had 4 novels. The most successful one had sold probably 35,000 copies at the time. And I thought that was great. You know, as far as I was concerned, I had a life as a writer. I never aspired to have that happen. And it was such a shock to everyone, I think. It just, for whatever reason, caught the public imagination and took off. And you know, I had stumbled on this little known story that my husband's grandfather had been orphaned and sent on a train with his siblings to this little town, Jamestown, North Dakota. And he was featured in an article on orphan train riders. And when I read the article, it was sort of what I was talking about, that I immediately knew this was an amazing story that I hadn't really read. And but I didn't, it took me a while to write it, because, or to come around to the idea of writing it, because it wasn't my story. So I wasn't sure I had a right to tell it. So I'm so glad that I eventually got up the courage to do it, because it then inspired me to take on other big projects, bigger in a way, eventually. But Orphan Train was a wild ride, and it continues to be. You know, if that's the book I'm remembered for, that's okay. But it definitely changed my life. But as I say, I would have kept writing. I would have kept writing and editing and teaching, because I'm a writer and that's what I do. I'm not writing to be a bestseller. I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it because it's what I love to do.